Hello and welcome to the National D-Day Memorials Lunchbox Lecture. I am John Long, the Director of Education, and a little bit different today. Normally we have a historian or an author in to talk about their work. Today we're going to talk about ourselves because this is the 20th anniversary of the opening of the National D-Day Memorial, technically next month, but coming up. And so we're going to take the opportunity to talk to our longest serving staff member and the one who is the keeper of the institutional memory, April Cheek-Messier, our president. So welcome, April.
Yes, thank you, John. I haven't talked to you in a long time, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, yeah, we'll give you a tour afterwards.
Okay.
Well, wonderful. Let's congratulations on 20 years.
20 years.
Not only of the memorial being open, but your employment here as well, because April goes back to the very beginning. And so let's start there. You start, and right after that is the big dedication.
I did. Yes, I was kind of hurled into some planning because we were actually getting ready for the dedication in 2001. I actually started in January of 2001. I had been out of graduate school for just a couple of years, had worked at another museum, which I had loved, Avoca Museum, great museum, by the way. But I came here and immediately there was, of course, lots of planning going on for the dedication. Now, when I started in January, we had no idea at that point exactly who was coming. We just knew that we were planning this gigantic commemoration, that we were going to have a lot of people. It was in May. A lot of times people ask me, when did you know the president was coming? You may be surprised, you may not, to know that we didn't find out the president of the United States was coming until mid-May. And of course, I will just share some slides here, maybe. Hopefully I can get this to work. Oh, let's see. It's not changing. I love technology. That's one thing that hasn't changed over years. Sometimes technology works and sometimes it doesn't. It could be, yes, there we go. But the President of the United States, we found out from the White House that he was going to be coming in mid-May. We found out about that. So we had 3 weeks left for the dedication. And as you can imagine, with Secret Service and all of the planning that goes with security, pretty much all the planning we had done prior to that point got thrown out the window. In many ways, had to start over. It was an amazing 3 weeks of preparation. But what an event. I mean, I have to say, some of my memories from that were certainly the excitement that this was our nation's monument to D-Day. What an event this was going to be. We were so excited. And again, I'm not sure if, there we go, that's working. But that was the big day. And there you see the picture. 24,000 people attended this event. Thousands of people on the outside. You can't really see it too well in the picture, but there's on the perimeter, there was actually a chain link fence. So the thousands more people outside of that chain link fence, you couldn't get in. It was just an incredible sight. It took us all morning to get all the buses up with all the people to the monument. And I think for me, it was a very hot day. Those of you who went may remember that. But truly, I think the most memorable event of that entire day was the moment when we recognized the Normandy veterans. And truly at that point, this was 2001, when they played Fanfare for the Common Man. And of course, the D-Day veterans were seated in that crowd there in the middle plaza. And all of those veterans stood up, and it was almost like a wave as they all stood. There were hundreds of them. And I can remember just crying. I think we were all just so overcome with emotion at that point. One, from being exhausted, but two, just seeing what a day this was and what that meant to those veterans who were there to finally see this come to fruition. It was amazing. Which, by the way, it almost didn't happen because the night before we had a horrible storm, really a storm like we had not seen in I don't know how long. And it truly, we were all done with everything. Everything was set up, ready for the next morning. And a storm came through about 5:30 that afternoon and literally knocked every chair down, destroyed a lot of our tents, things that were set up. The gift store tent ripped a giant hole in that and ruined half of our merchandise. It took all night long, and really, I can't say enough about Coleman Adams Construction at that time, of course, working on the monument, stayed through most of the night and got everything set back up so we were ready for the next morning. So.
And then another storm
And then
Yeah,
another
through the
storm
6th.
came on the 6th, but it was after everything was over. It did create problems when we were trying to get everybody off the site. As you can imagine, it took us 4 or 5 hours to get everybody on the site that morning. A storm was coming shortly after the ceremony was over, and then everybody was trying to leave. So that created some issues.
Mhm.
But overall, what a day. Something we'll never forget.
I was in the
Never
crowd.
forget.
We got on the bus just as the rain started. So,
Did you?
so we
Okay.
escaped the worst.
You were
of it.
lucky. You were
Yes,
lucky.
but I agree with you. It was quite a day.
Yeah.
We were not near the veterans, but I did see many of them through the day as people were taking their seats, and it was very moving,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yeah.
So you get a job at the National D-Day Memorial, brand new site.
Yes.
What did you do? What were your responsibilities?
What didn't we do? So at that point, we were a very tiny staff. We still are. We're 19 people. We do a lot. So you wear many, many, many hats. But at the time, there was so much attention on June the 6th, getting ready for the dedication. Part of the reason I was hired was to bring me in to really get ready for June the 7th and June the 8th and June the 9th and working in terms of education. How do we deliver tours? How do we get the word out about tours? How long should a tour be? And what does that tour look like? How do we do school programs? Because we didn't really have a facility to do a school program. We had tours that we could give, but not like an indoor space where we could really bring school groups in and show them things.
Like this building.
Like the building we're in right now. We didn't have any of that at the time. So part of my task, and I'll show you this next slide, because it's not working again. Shucks. Let's see. We'll just go to the next slide. But if you look at this chart here, you can see our first 2 years, actually first 3 years, were pretty incredible in terms of visitation. And I actually look at these numbers now, and I can't believe we were able to handle the kind of traffic that we did, but we did. I mean, we would literally have 5 and 6 buses a day come through the memorial, plus school groups, plus just tons of visitors. Those first few weeks here were literally thousands of visitors a day. And so it was incredible. And so we really had to figure out how do we keep people moving around the site and keep it flowing. And so designing the tour, training tour guides, because there for a while, our small staff was doing most of the tours. So we had to get everybody trained. But then also, how do we make sure that our kids are learning as much as they can about the history? But you can see over the years, our visitation kind of evened out to something more along the lines of around 70 to 80,000 visitors a year. And of course, then the recession hit in 2009, 2010 timeframe. And after the recession, we really leveled out to about 50 to 60,000 visitors a year, with the exception, of course, of last year where we had the pandemic, which really threw us off because we were closed for 3 months. But you can kind of see here,
look at the numbers. That's
but wonderful numbers. And you can see here that we have certainly been able to educate tens of thousands of people since our 20 years, over the 20 years. So really proud of that.
I've talked to many people who've told me, oh, I've been to the D-Day Memorial back when it opened. And I was like, you got to come back. So if you're in that 417,000 and you haven't been back since then, you really owe yourself a visit to Bedford.
Absolutely. We hope people will come back because it is word of mouth. And so, certainly one of the things that when I was looking at how do we educate young people was we really need a space. And so Dr. McIntosh, who was president at the time, and myself talked about how nice it would be to have just a GP large military tent. One of our military tents, put it up and educate kids in the tent. What a neat space for kids to kind of breathe in the air of that GP large tent and feel like, they're there. So we had the Seabees come in. The Seabees actually were kind enough to build the frame of the tent, and there it is. And this really served its purpose for so many years. We love the tent. The kids love the tent. Mm-hmm. It was just a nice space where we could do some interactive learning before the tour. What we didn't plan on at the time, though, was how hot that tent would get. Mm-hmm. With the sun beating down on that tent, I will tell you that by noon of most days, you couldn't stand to be inside of it. And so every day when I would come to work, I would quickly, there's me in the corner over there, many years ago, but I would roll up the sides of the tent just to get cross breeze and some air in there. So in the beginning, we learned it wasn't ideal, but it certainly served its purpose. And here you can see kind of a picture of what that looks like. And it would oftentimes take you about half an hour to kind of roll those sides up and cool it down, because you'd have to get here early enough to cool it down. And so you couldn't keep a lot of things out at night either, because then you were worried about critters getting into the tent and things like that. It didn't take me long to figure out that I needed to write a grant for air conditioning. And that sounds crazy because how do you air condition a tent? Well, we had a staff member on our maintenance staff at the time, Bob Hackman, who was brilliant. He made this insulation out of foam, and he was able to put it throughout the entire tent. And we received a grant for a really nice air conditioning unit, and we air conditioned our tent, which allowed us to have a lot more objects inside, and we made some locking cabinets and things like that. So it really evolved. And again, students and teachers love the tent. So, and sometimes they still ask about it, I think, but we're now in this wonderful Quonset hut, which is a little more secure than the tent.
True. And the tent, I started in the tent also, many years later, but it was its own ecosystem.
It was. Yes, and the wildlife particularly liked our tent.
I opened a cabinet once to get some school supplies out, and a mouse jumped out and bounced off my forehead.
It was an adventure. You never knew what you might find. Yes, I encountered many, many things, but it was fun. It was an interactive space, and to be able to do a lot with the kids and showing them the elements of the home front, for example, what the soldiers carried, it really made a difference. So that they weren't just going out and seeing the stone and the granite of the memorial, but they were really getting this kind of in-depth interactive experience, looking at the things they carried. It makes such a difference. And I continue to have students today that remember these programs.
I've talked to many adults who say, oh, yes, I was up there. I went in a tent and the lady talked to me about D-Day.
Isn't that great?
I know that lady was. And many of these artifacts we still use for the program.
We're very proud of it. So, yes. So to answer your question, a lot of what I did in the very beginning was just getting ready for having that kind of those kinds of groups, students, lots of programming, events. How do we bring a variety of people to the memorial and share these stories? So, yeah.
Excellent. So, what else makes you proud when you think of your time at the memorial?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that. So, and it's very hard to boil that down to one thing. But I will say one of the things I'm really very proud of is the necrology wall. And this is something when I first started, Carol Tuckweiler was working on this project. She was a staff member who had devoted years to researching name by name every single soldier, sailor, airman killed on D-Day. What a task, a daunting task.
Carol, if you're listening, you're still my hero.
Oh, truly. I mean, how she did this. Because remember, when we were built, we did not have, there was no database that existed anywhere of who died on D-Day. So to really take that on and to really have the determination to see it through, because a lot of people told Carol along the way, you're never going to be able to do this. Don't even try. And she kept going. And I'm just so proud of the wall and that list of names, because to me, it personalizes the story. It's not just 4,415 who died on D-Day. They're names, and there are people that we can put faces to in many instances. And what an incredible way to add to the history of D-Day for the world is to be able to have this name-by-name listing. So really proud of that, and not just the American names, but the Allied names. And I'm very proud of the fact that here at the memorial, we focus not just on the American story, but the Allied story as a whole. And of course, you continue to do a lot of that research.
The necrology is not finished, and likely never will. And I guess I can go ahead and tease a little bit. Exactly. Memorial Day this year, we'll have a virtual program to add 2 names to the wall. We continue researching. Yeah. And periodically, the records can be very confusing because, as I explain to people a lot, their goal is to win the war, not to keep perfectly immaculate records and to keep historians in the future happy. So often there are contradictions and things, but we continue to research, and we have found 2 more names to add. We're working on some others. So the numbers may change again.
Yes, and I have to give it to John, who's really so diligent, almost overly diligent, because he keeps coming to me and saying, I think I found more names. So we continue to update the wall, which is really important, because we don't want to leave anyone out. But how wonderful for families and for those visiting the memorial to really see in a tangible way the sacrifices that were made on June 6, 1944. But tied to that, I'm very proud of our education program. I just, you know, I think it's a real testament to, we're a small staff, but over the years, we're an educational foundation. That is what we are. The memorial is simply, really, in many ways, a tool to teach the next generation about why D-Day was so important. Why is it relevant today? And I think we've done such a great job of having a variety of ways to teach that story, whether it's bringing veterans to the memorial, whether it's doing interactive programs like Living History, the tent programs and the programs that we do now in our Kwanzaa huts, all of that really adds to making sure young people know the story. I love seeing things like this. Now, we haven't seen that lately because of the pandemic, but seeing buses line up, it's just so great to see young people hearing the stories of our veterans. And they won't be able to hear them firsthand much longer, but the fact that they can come here and hear them even from us and from some of the histories that we had to share that. I love seeing scenes like this. It makes everything we do so worth it. Again, the plaque program, whether it's a narrative plaque or the plaque with the names on it, when you see young people really taking this in, it just means so much. And, I just think a picture says 1,000 words, right? I mean, that's what more can you say when you see images like that? So education is certainly critical. I love seeing young people at the memorial. Our guides love seeing young people and sharing these stories with them. And then collecting the histories. Through the years, we've collected so many histories of our veterans, and not just their stories, but also, some of their things, their artifacts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I certainly love the fact that we have behind us, for example, this amazing collection that will be able to tell all of these stories even more so in years to come. Yeah,
absolutely. And I often say, if we only speak to adults, we are gone in a few years. Talking to the children, making them aware of D-Day and World War II, and encourage them to learn more. That's what's going to keep whoever has our job 50 years from now, still in business.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. So,
great. What's changed the most in your time here? Quite a few things.
A lot has changed, but I think for me, the thing that has changed the most and that's the hardest is not seeing our veterans the way we used to. When I came here 20 years ago, it was not unusual to have 24 or more D-Day or World War II veterans on site a day. And many of them, for example, when I first started, were our tour guides. We had our tour guides were D-Day veterans. Our tour guides were World War II veterans. What better way to give a tour than hear from a veteran who was there? I mean, it was just incredible. And so that really created a whole different experience, I think, for people who were interacting with the memorial and our tour guides and things like that. I look at this picture here, Carter Fisher, who was on board the USS Arkansas on D-Day, 4,000 yards off of Omaha Beach. Evelyn Kowalczyk, she was one of 500 flight nurses during World War II who served overseas and went in on D-Day on B+3. Bobby Johnson, who was a tail gunner on a B-29 during World War II. Jim Bryant with the 82nd Airborne, a glider infantryman, who had incredible stories and wrote a wonderful book, Flying Coffins Over Europe. Incredible story. Buster Schaaf, U.S. Navy, who I think ferried in 3 boatloads of troops on his Higgins boat on D-Day. I mean, when you come to work every day and you get to sit down and hear those stories, it's just incredible. And events, when we would literally ask D-Day veterans, for example, on June 6th to come and stand before the crowd, and we filled up the whole front row of veterans, as they stood up and you got to go. I see Ray Nance standing right there by the wreath and so many others there that I recognize. It's just what a treat to be able to come to work every day and just talk to those veterans. And at the time we had a wonderful little deck area, and they loved to sit on the deck and just talk. I mean, they would just come up and sit and talk. If they weren't a tour guide, many of them just enjoyed coming up and sitting on the deck and just talking to visitors and talking to one another. we learned so much from our veterans when they just talked to each other, because a lot of times they didn't tell the stories to us, but they would tell them to each other. So we would oftentimes be back there writing things down. It's like, I never heard that before. But again, just what a luxury that was, what a treasure that we had to be able to day by day.
I've done that too, listen kind of over their shoulders. And one of my favorite stories is two veterans. One had it on his World War II veteran cap, and he said, "Oh yeah, I always wear this. I'll go to a restaurant because someone will buy my dinner."
I love that, and he's right.
Absolutely,
he's right. But I love it. Mr. Hobbs here. He often would come up and share his stories. He didn't do tours, but he loved to just come and share his story. Right there, saluting is Hillman Prestridge. He lives in Alabama. We stay in touch with Hillman. He's an amazing veteran who comes up every June the 6th. And there he was meeting Roy Stevens for one of the first times. I'll never forget that day. And they really hit it off, and I asked him to lay that wreath that day, and Hillman still talks about how that was one of the greatest days he remembers, was just laying that wreath with Roy Stevens. So, I really do miss that interaction day in and day out. There's Roy Stevens and Pride Wingfield, who was also with Company A. And we're in the tent there, and they used to come in and just share stories with the kids, just anytime. You didn't have to go and schedule it. They just would be here, and you would say, "Hey, why don't you come over and say hi to the kids and talk to them?" I miss that. Mr. Dabney was with the 320th Barge Balloon Battalion, in our own backyard as we were researching and trying to find someone who served in the 320th. Didn't realize he was in Roanoke, and we were so happy to discover he was right down the road. Again, to me, that's changed the most, is that we don't have that like we used to, obviously. So it changes the way you present your stories to young people and to your audience, because we don't have them to do those tours anymore. And
we have to do it for them.
We have to do it for them. Yeah.
We keep their stories alive and pass it on to the next generation.
That's right.
Absolutely. So a lot of improvements. What are some of the best improvements?
There's been a lot of improvements too.
Yes. Well, if you paid attention in that picture of the dedication, the garden was not mud. Yes.
Exactly. It was very muddy. Yes. Things like that. Obviously, the memorial was never fully completed at the dedication, so we continued to add to it over the years. Things like this. I don't know, some of you may remember the original construction trailer. They served as our offices for many years. Here. We were lucky to have it because we didn't really have an office space. So that's what we operated out of. So I'm really grateful over the years. And here you still see the tent. This was right before we replaced that with the third Quonset hut, which we're in now. But things like, I think the Quonset huts were just a wonderful addition to the monument, allowing us to have something much more efficient, a great space. And they look very nice, obviously.
Historically relevant.
And historically relevant. They tell a story. We want everything here to tell a story. And the Quonset huts certainly have a story to tell, being kind of the workforce of the war in terms of how quickly they could go up and be taken apart, moved. They served as barracks and field hospitals and everything during the war. And even after the war, when there was a housing shortage, the Quonset huts were used for college dormitories and classroom space and for housing. So what a great story. So I think that's been a wonderful improvement. Bobby Johnson had a lot to do with that. Fleta and Peter Green had a lot to do with it. Claiborne Robbins and Mary Ellen Robbins helped donate to make those things happen. So we're really proud of our donors for doing that. But yeah, as you said, the garden wasn't completed during the dedication. So things like the folly going up for the first time, seeing that come together and the garden taking shape. Eisenhower going in.
And that's Jim Brothers there at the end.
That's right.
The sculptor.
So these were certainly very meaningful changes, and also just the memorial blossoming. When we first opened, everything was pretty small. Excuse me, the trees and everything. So to see it really evolve has been terrific over the years. So lots of changes.
Absolutely. And it's the pollen from those trees that are getting to you, right?
It is. Every year I'm dealing with allergies from those trees.
And you mentioned was very common. Just till really last year with the pandemic, to have World War II veterans come along. But let's tell us some of the other interesting visitors you've seen through the years.
We've had a lot of interesting visitors, so I'm just going to go through a couple as I try to get my voice back. But here's a few. Oh, the other thing we've added, I do want you to talk about that for a second.
Oh, sure.
Because, that's been huge. So if you want to,
Until we built this Quonset hut, we had no place to display because we're primarily an outdoor site. And yet we have currently about 13,000 artifacts, documents, photos in our collection, and had no place to display them. So right behind us, these cases, which were grant funded as well, gives us an opportunity to show off some artifacts and adds to our educational initiatives, because the students coming in here for our class get to see what's in the cases first, often ask questions, and then the general public, when this is not being used for virtual programs like today or for classes like tomorrow morning, this is open to the public to come in and see some of the artifacts as well.
Very important. I think this has made such a difference for people to actually see some of our collection, and the fact that in the future we will have a museum to display all this. But what a great space to be able to come in and see some of it now. So definitely. So some of the guests, you mentioned guests.
Mm-hmm.
We did have Mickey Rooney here, of course, many years ago. These are just people that I remember that I thought were very interesting. Obviously, William Christopher, who played Father Mulcahy on MASH, visited and was very impressed. They were all very impressed with the memorial and loved it. Of course, we had Vice President Pence here for the 75th anniversary. Lots of dignitaries over the years. But for me, excuse me, the true stars are the veterans. You can't say enough about the stories that you get to hear day in and day out. Wallace Woodward, for example, who his landing craft sunk on D-Day. Norwood Thomas, Jack Reed, and I'm losing my voice.
Norwood just left us earlier this year.
Yes.
What a fantastic man to get to know while he was with us.
Yeah.
I was giving a tour to some fifth graders one day, and we finished up. We're coming back down, and one of the guides said, "Oh, you need to go talk to this person." And I looked over as an older gentleman. I figured, oh, it must be World War II veteran. I went over and introduced myself, and it turned out to be Charles Cole, who flew on the Doolittle raids.
Oh, wow.
And he was 100, I think, during his visit, and was walking around on his own. He refused a card, but was walking around. Kind of a warm day. It wasn't terribly hot, but I remember thinking the fifth graders were all complaining about the heat. And here's this 100-year-old World War II veteran who's gung ho. And as he was talking to myself and some of the other guides, he mentioned he's from Dayton, Ohio. And one of the guys started doing some math. Wait a minute, if you're 100 years old and you grew up in Dayton, did you ever meet the Wright brothers? And Colonel Cole laughed and said, I used to mow their lawn.
Oh, my word.
And I tell that story like, where else can you go to work and meet someone who knew the Wright brothers?
You can't.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't. But what a treat. So, and Jerry, Charles Chabot was the last surviving Comanche code talker of World War II. Oh, gosh, amazing man. And Jerry Yellen. Jerry flew the final combat mission in World War II. And actually, I'm going to let Jerry speak since I can't right now. I have a video that I'm hoping will play, but I want Jerry to speak because one of the most moving things to me was when Jerry visited. I met Jerry in California, and Jerry and I hit it off right away. And I said, Jerry, you've got to come see our memorial. And after he toured the memorial, because Jerry was very famous, very, very well known, many books written about him, had traveled the world. He said, April, I've been all over the world. This was after his tour. In fact, I think you gave him a tour.
I did. Mm-hmm. And his sister, who was married to a D-Day
Exactly. And after the tour, he came up to me, and I was nervous because he wasn't speaking, and Jerry never stopped talking. So I didn't know what was wrong. And he said, April, I've been all over the world, and I've seen every memorial you can see. And he said, I've never seen a memorial like this one. And it brought me to tears because to me, what better compliment could you ever have than from a World War II veteran? And it just, anyway, we're going to let Jerry speak. So we're going to play this short video, and then we'll start to wrap some things up and take some questions. But let's let Jerry talk for a second. Oh, I didn't push it. Let's see.
My name is Jerry Yellen, and I'm one of 16 million young Americans who served their country in World War II. I'm at the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. Bedford, Virginia was chosen for the memorial because 19 young men from Bedford were killed on D-Day, June 6, 1944. I flew the last combat mission flown in World War II on August 14, 1945. And my wingman was killed, Phil Schlomberg, 19 years old, from Brooklyn, New York. I came to this memorial to speak, not knowing what it was like. And I was overwhelmed by the silence and the scope and the sculpture. It was so meaningful to me that I walked away just amazed that such a place exists. Nothing affected me as much as coming here and seeing this memorial. This is a very important place in American history. And when people come here, I think they'll be overwhelmed by what they learn, by what they see, and especially by what they feel. The expansion of the National D-Day Memorial is the expansion of knowledge of who we are, what we are. We gave our lives, 400,000+ young Americans died in World War II so that we could have freedom. This monument, this memorial, is a dedication to that freedom.
Gary was here as the keynote speaker
Yes.
on June 6th and returned that fall to make this video. And I think that says a lot about his commitment to our cause as well.
He loved it. He became our campaign co-chair before he passed away.
Yes.
But again, when you heard compliments like that, there was really no higher compliment. So yeah, he said it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite parts of the memorial?
Well, I tell you, again, you can't buttonhole me on that because I have too many, but I am going to mention a few because they all have stories with them. The Victory Garden obviously is one of my favorites because it's something that I got started early on. I really wanted another interactive way to kind of introduce kids to World War II history. Love the fact that we bring kids up and really empower them to make this their garden. We worked with some local kids in the community and really made it theirs. And over the years, it's just become such a special project. And to have them kind of take care of it, grow the vegetables, take the vegetables home with them. It had a special place in my heart. And it's just been, I think, great for kids to learn about that aspect of World War II, how that kind of teamwork and coming together during the war, because the home front, if it hadn't been for the home front, we couldn't have won the war. So it's an important part of the story.
And kids had a role to play in the war.
Exactly. So I love the Victory Garden. That's special to me. The Gold Star Families Memorial Monument here is really important too. Some of you have heard of obviously Herschel Woody Williams is very well known. In fact, now he is the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II. And Herschel Woody, we call him Woody. Woody and I were having dinner. This has been quite a few years ago. And he was telling me about this idea he had to place a Gold Star monument in every state in the nation. And it was still an idea at the time. And I told him, when you're ready to do that, we want to know about it because we want one here. And then fast forward, I believe it was 2017, maybe it was 2017, I think.
17, I believe.
We dedicated the monument. And I just think it's such a special part of the memorial. So love that. Homage. Of course, we have this special tie to a D-Day veteran, Ash Rockline, who every year we go over to the homage sculpture and remember those who lost their lives on D-Day. And Ash has that famous end of his speech where he says, "We will never forget." And I think that's so important. And I just love that. And I just love seeing the memorial in the evening. I think that's just, there's a sense of solemnity and solitude and reverence that you especially sense in the evening. That's very important. But those are some of my favorite places.
And you're not going to pick one. So
Do you have one?
it'd be like asking you to pick your favorite child, right? So,
Exactly. I can't do it.
they all are our favorite.
They all, exactly.
Tell us about a particular moment that has really stuck with you for 2 decades now.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll be brief because, again, with all the pollen and me losing my voice, nobody wants to listen to me too long. But one of the most important events, I think, was one that we did. It was actually in 2004. And it was when Company A was deployed for the first time since World War II. This was very emotional, as you can imagine. You can see them marching up from Bedford, the community gathering around them, people crying, lots of tears, lots of goodbyes. We actually did the deployment ceremony right from the memorial. And just knowing what the community went through 60 years prior, it was emotional. And I'll just never forget that day because you really felt the anxiety, the fear. Of course, they're being deployed to Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom. And it was an emotional day. And I'll never forget the most chilling but beautiful moment that day was when, and the governor was here and lots of dignitaries, and they all spoke. But Roy Stevens stood up, of course, an original Bedford boy, and took the podium, and there was just silence. And at the end of his speech, he said, "We can do it before, and we'll do it again." And he raised his arm up, and it was just that moment, and the whole crowd, everybody went crazy. And it just, it changed that moment from fear and anxiety to hopefulness, and we're going to be okay. And they were. They came back. We had another ceremony at the site when they came home. Everybody returned safely. And what a day that was.
So they didn't have to march on that.
And they didn't have to march back.
Gave them a ride this time.
We gave them a ride. They deserved it. They've done enough marching. Another day, Peter Thomas, famous, many people, if you've watched Forensic Files, you've heard Peter Thomas's voice. Very well known for that.
Jello pudding commercials.
Jello pudding, yeah.
When I was a kid.
Yeah, very well known for his voiceovers. And but he was a D-Day veteran and was on Omaha Beach on D-Day. And one of my favorite moments was when we had the Lynchburg Symphony Orchestra at the memorial, and Peter Thomas here reading a poem that he wrote about D-Day. And the music playing in the background was in the evening, and it was, again, you could hear a pin drop, and it was absolutely stunningly beautiful because his voice is mesmerizing anyway. Here he was, a D-Day veteran, reading this poem that he wrote, and the symphony playing, and it was just a moment I won't forget. It was, yeah, again, just magical. So love that moment. And Peter Thomas he was an amazing individual. And I will say, just this week, a very emotional moment. Bobby Ray Daniels was killed in Korea, and his remains were never recovered. And we have actually, at many of our POW-MIA ceremonies over the years, talked a lot about some of our, for example, Virginia veterans who are missing in action. And we actually read his name. I guess it was just year before last we did, and had his nephew come up and family come up and read his name. And it was shortly after that they recovered his remains and were able to identify that indeed it was Bobby Ray Daniels, 17 years old. And just this Tuesday, his body was brought back to Bedford. And the family requested that he be brought to the memorial and circled monument. And so I was up there, and it was, again, I'm going to get emotional talking about it, but what a moment. And to me, it's just, again, shows, I think, how healing The memorial is not just for D-Day veterans, not just for World War II veterans, for all of our veterans and their families. But there is a sense of healing that takes place, I think, when you come to this monument and you experience it. That sense of closure that happened that night, just, amazing. There's no words for it. So,
Something else I hear from a lot of people, of course, with the D-Day memorial, we honor the D-Day participants. Then there's the larger group of World War II veterans, and we love when they can visit.
Yeah.
But I hear from people all the time that we honor all veterans.
Yeah, we do.
This is a good
So
example.
it's so important to always, and teach our young people to thank all of our veterans and to understand what serving your country means and the sacrifice for the families and for that, for the men and women who do serve, what that means. So yeah, lots of great moments. But I have to say that I'm particularly also proud of 2019, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, the incredible job that our team, our staff, again, tiny staff, did to pull off this magnificent event for our D-Day veterans, because we wanted this to be a day like no other, a day they would never forget. And again, I'm going to let the video speak for this. It's very short, and then we're going to wrap up. So if you have questions you'd like to submit, as soon as this video is over, we can take some questions. But we want you to watch us because I think it really sums up what an incredible day it was.
Today, we have the opportunity to bring history to life here in Bedford. This is the Piper Cub, the B-25 Mitchell bomber, Boeing's flying fortress, the F-35 Lightning II, the C-130 Hercules. It is the B-52 Super Fortress.
For the land of the free and the home of the brave.
We retell the stories of men like Lieutenant Ray Nance, the last of the Bedford boys, because that is perhaps the closest we can come to knowing what it was like to stuff off his landing craft and into that carnage on that fateful June morning 75 years ago.
On that day in 1944, they gave up two lives, the one on the beach and the one that they would have led had they come back. I have the great honor and the distinct pleasure to introduce Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Mike Pence.
To these and other D-Day veterans among us, I say, gentlemen, you honor us with your presence. And I want to assure you, we see you not just as you are, but as you were.
It is now my privilege to read the names of the veterans who are here today. Henry Gurney, Private First Class, U.S. Army. He landed on Omaha Beach with the 2nd Infantry Division, then fought in France. Ash Rothline, Tech 4, U.S. Army. His unit made its way across Normandy shortly after D-Day and continued into northern France and Germany. Olivia Clark, Private First Class, U.S. Army Air Force. She was one of only 18 women chosen to go into Germany with General Patton. Bill Sisk, Private First Class, U.S. Army. Went ashore on D-Day on Utah Beach with the 90th Infantry Division.
Dear veterans of World War II, please allow me to say again, thank you. God bless America. Vive la France.
And today we also think of others from this very community who were among your ranks on that fateful day. 44 boys who had never strayed far from home, mustered out to England, and some to eternity.
We will see one airplane, the P-51 Mustang, pull out of the formation, indicating that that aviator and those who have perished have gone on to heaven, headed west, as they say, in aviation circles.
And on this 75th anniversary of Nina, on behalf of a grateful nation, to those brave veterans gathered here who fought so long ago, and to all those looking on from glory, we say one more time, thank you for your service. Thank you for our freedom.
Excellent. What a day.
Yes.
Um,
That was, I get chills every time I watch that, especially with the flyover at the end. That was extraordinary for what it was. It was such a fitting day for our veterans.
about 100 World War II veterans in attendance.
Yeah.
And I was very conscious that that will not happen again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I took a chance to talk to as many of them as I could, and I got a lot of autographs.
Yes. But that was, to me, my favorite moment was watching those veterans cross the bridge with somebody's active duty serving in the military, and going back and looking at the photos of the admiration as those active duty military personnel are walking them across the bridge was just so neat to see, and see the veterans. Oh, it was wonderful.
The scene you saw a couple times there where there were 10 World War II veterans who were chosen to meet with the vice president.
Mhm.
But I realized as we were doing that it's really the opposite. He got to meet them.
Exactly. Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
I mean, as we all were so honored that day. So I don't know if there's any questions, but we're happy to answer any. But what a wonderful 20 years. We're excited about the future. There's so many. We have an anniversary coming up, in fact.
We do.
So we do have some exciting things planned. Little bit different because of the pandemic, but we're still doing some in-person ceremonies and activities and lots of things going on. So
Memorial Day, a lot of family-oriented activities
Yeah.
on the day. Not one of our big ceremonies as we've done in the past, but we'll get back to that as soon as all the restrictions are lifted. And then on June 5th, because that's a Saturday,
or Sunday, Saturday is June the 5th. Yeah,
we have
definitely.
reenactors, kids activities, Victory Garden
That's right.
be
Go check our
open, and
Victory Garden. Yeah.
a lot of big things that day.
Yeah.
And then on June 6th, the actual anniversary, some more commemoration. So
Exactly.
invite everyone to join us, certainly.
It's going to be a wonderful weekend. We will have some veterans with us, we think, so we're looking forward to that. But do go to our website because we have a actually schedule of events. And so you may want to check that out to see the different things that you might want to come for. We have the 29th Division Band, for example, performing, another band and Enduring Freedom Honor Team coming. So lots to come and do. And then author Rick Byer will be here, which is an incredible story that hopefully you'll come and check out our inflatable tank that we're going to have on site.
Right.
So more to come on all that.
June 4th, panel discussion with 3
That's right.
very prominent military historians. There'll be a virtual program on June 4th at 1 o'clock, I believe.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So,
Looking forward to that.
mhm.
Well, it looks like no questions. So I think we're going to head out and get ready for Memorial Day and the June 4th, 5th, and 6th weekend. So thank you all for tuning in.
Well,
We'll
thank
have to see
you.
you soon. Yeah.
Thank you, April, for sharing some of your
Yeah.
recollections over 20 years. And we're looking forward to the next 20.
We'll see. Thank you. You all, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.